Well, here we are. Time for the sermon on spirituality. I have to say, I've been looking forward to this one for a long time. It's always a fun and interesting and challenging topic to address. As I'll say in a few minutes, I don't think in religious life there's a concept that's more wonderful and confusing, more vague, and yet inspiring than the word spirituality. So I really look forward to exploring this with you this morning. And I have to say I was so pleased this week to have that reading by Jeffrey Lockwood come my way. As I listened to the descriptions which I shared with you this morning being read at this committee meeting, I was so moved and actually taken to what I would call a kind of a spiritual place as I listened to the beauty and poetry and lyricism of his language and his descriptions of becoming, in that moment, part of the curvature of the earth and feeling a kind of a taste of infinity. I think that language gets at what I think is the heart of what it means to be spiritual. Now, for Lockwood, his holy place, his spiritual and sacred ground, is that immense and beautiful grassland. For me, it's been and it remains water, and especially coastlines. That's the place for me when I find myself in the presence of something sacred. I know when I'm standing on a beach or a lake shore or perhaps overlooking a beautiful bay or the ocean, my pace begins to slow down. My breathing becomes less hurried, and all the troubles and worries that just a moment earlier seemed so pressing, so hard to figure out, and hard to resolve, they suddenly lose their urgency and importance. It's almost as if I am magically transported to a very different time and place, a time and a place in which I experience life and the universe as it truly is, and yet as I so often, I think almost every day, fail to see. Beautiful, awe-inspiring, ever-changing, and yet timeless and eternal. Now, I have to say that water and the coast haven't always had this effect on me. I actually grew up on the Gulf Coast of Florida, but I have to say that I spent far less time on the water or at the beach than most of my friends. I'm sure part of the reason was, until in my late teens, I wasn't a very good swimmer and didn't feel particularly safe or comfortable around the water. But whatever the reason was, growing up, I never really took the time to see the water or the coastline or to experience their extraordinary beauty. But my relationship with water and with the coast changed one very memorable day while I was in college. I was spending a semester abroad in London, and one weekend I decided to escape the hustle and bustle of the city. So on a Friday afternoon in early March, one of my roommates and I hopped a train, and we journeyed a few hours south and west of London to a part of England known as Cornwall. Any of you ever been to southwestern England, to Cornwall before? A few of you. I think you'll agree that this particular part of England is known for its rich history and culture and for its absolutely breathtaking beauty. Now, on our first day in Cornwall, and we journeyed we stayed in a city called Penzance, as in the Pirates of Penzance, which is really in the extreme southwestern tip of England. On our first day, we hopped on a bus, and we took the bus out to the very, very, very tip of England, of Cornwall to a place known as Land's End. Now, Land's End, as I said, is located, it's actually the most westerly point of England, and it is best known for its steep and rocky cliffs that actually overlook the place where the Atlantic Ocean and the English Channel come together. The photo on the cover of your order of service, which came out a little bit dark in our photocopying machine, is of Land's End, and I'm going to ask Warren now to pop that. That's the same photo. I think that gives you a much better feel for what Land's End looks like. Pretty breathtaking, wouldn't you say? And that's basically where I was. I can't tell you the exact blade of grass that I was standing on, but that's what it looked like on that day. After we got off the bus, we climbed one of those cliffs. It was one of those, I know that for sure. And soon found ourselves right there at the top enjoying this magnificent vista across the ocean there, across that place where the Atlantic and the English Channel meet. I remember thinking to myself, wow, I wonder if I'd been standing here 500 or so years ago. This is the place where ships coming in from the Atlantic, coming into the Channel would come through. I thought, wow, would I have seen the Spanish Armada sailing by on that day when they were coming to have their little conflict with Queen Elizabeth? I have to say that this view, this perspective, was up to that point in my life the most spectacular view I had ever seen. The water was deep blue, and the air smelled, I remember it smelled so crisp and clear. The sun was bright, like it is that day, and although it was early March, the air was warm. I remember thinking it was surprisingly warm. It was so warm, in fact, that we actually took our jackets off and kind of walked around in our sweatshirts, and it was really, really comfortable. I remember, as I looked out over that water, thinking to myself, much like Jeffrey Lockwood says when he's in those moments on the grassland, that I can see, it feels like I can see forever. That what is in front of me is infinite and has no bounds. Well, after we were there for a while, as we stood on that cliff enjoying this magnificent view that looked very much like this, we noticed a slight change in the temperature. It started to cool off suddenly, and the wind began to pick up. And as we looked out, we noticed the sky was still predominantly blue and beautiful, but that there was approaching our place, there was what looked like a dark storm cloud. It was small. It wasn't like the whole sky became dark. It was a very small little cloud, but it looked as if it was coming our way. It was still surrounded by blue sky and white puffy clouds. Now, having grown up in Florida, I'm used to the sky turning really dark, everything getting almost black and big bolts of lightning coming down. And to be honest with you, thunderstorms and lightning, they do kind of freak me out. It's just one of those things. But this little cloud, it didn't look particularly scary or ominous. So we stayed, and we just sat there and watched as it approached. And I have to say, I'm so glad that we stayed, because in a matter of just a few minutes, a few moments, I was engulfed in the most amazingly beautiful little snow squall that I have ever experienced. And it was so quick. It was like just a minute, maybe a minute and a half. It was like there was this cloud and it started snowing. Of course, I put my coat on, and it was like there was this little snowstorm, and all around us there was all this blue and beauty. And then, as suddenly as it appeared, it was gone. The sun returned, and I once again found myself in the midst of that warm, beautiful, sunny day. I remember thinking to myself, something's interesting and important just happened. But I was only 19 or 20. I hadn't at that point gotten to a place in my life where I was, had read a bunch of theology and was figuring all this out. But that moment and that experience has stayed with me right up until this day. And I have to say, this is what I believe and what I experienced in that moment. I have to say that for that brief instant, I was truly standing on sacred ground and experiencing something that I can only describe as divine. In that moment, I think what I was feeling, I know what I was feeling. I was seeing my life for one of the first times as part of something greater than myself, as part of a universe of incomparable beauty, immense power, and great, great mystery. For the briefest moments, I experienced life. I didn't understand this at the time, but this is what I understand now. I experienced life not as a linear, straight line in which I am at the center with all of the things that go on in my life. Life not as a straight line, but rather as an infinite and awe-inspiring circle in which I am unique and yet interrelated, free and yet deeply connected to all that surrounds me. On that beautiful coastline, in the midst of that incredible snow squall, I experienced a truth and a reality so beautiful, so powerful, and so mysterious that I have now in my life come to call that presence, that experience, God. Now, I don't want to give you the impression that my use of the word God to describe what happened to me on that cliff implies that I fully understand that experience or that I have figured out the meaning of existence. Far from it. In fact, looking back on that moment and others that I have had since then, I think the phrase that best describes my core theological conclusion about that experience and about life as I understand it at this time, my core conclusion about ultimate reality is awe-inspiring mystery. Awe-inspiring mystery. But there is one thing I can say for certain about all of those experiences that have led me to awe-inspiring mystery. From the moment I was enveloped in that snow squall right up to the present, those moments of awe, of beauty, and of mystery have without a doubt been deeply, deeply spiritual. If I'm going to use the word spiritual to describe my life, it's in those moments, those experiences, that it fits. Now, as I said before, of all the terms and concepts that we encounter in religious life, I don't think there's any doubt that spiritual and spirituality are the most confusing and I think the most misunderstood. They are used by people in so many different ways, in so many different contexts. Two of the ones I hear the most frequently as a minister are, one is, of course, spiritual is that thing you are if you don't like organized religion, right? I'm spiritual, but not religious. Okay, I think that means I don't like organized religion, so therefore that makes me spiritual. I'm not really not sure that's quite what spiritual means. Another use of the word spiritual, or definition or understanding of spiritual and spirituality, that I often hear is used by those who reject using this word in any context because spirituality is equated with belief, suggesting that being spiritual means having a firm, unquestioned belief in a God or a supernatural being. You know, that guy who stands behind the curtain and has the levers like the Wizard of Oz. That if you're spiritual, that means that's what you believe. Well, I guess you can probably tell from hearing my story that I have a very different understanding of spirituality. You see, when I reflect back on those moments of deep connection in my own life, it is clear to me that what mattered most is not what I believed. It's not what I believed. It's what I experienced. When I stood on that cliff in the snow squall, I didn't have the first clue about what I believed about God or religion or much of anything else, for that matter. And you know what? That was okay, because that moment was about experience and connection, not doctrine or dogma. Above all else, being spiritual, I think, is about experiencing a deep connection to something greater than ourselves, something that leads to a place of peace, of awe, of mystery, and of an incredible sense of oneness with all of existence. That, I think, is what it means to be spiritual. And as we think about the meaning of spirituality, I think it's useful to remember that the word spirit is derived from the ancient Hebrew word ruah, which literally means breath or wind. Spirit is a breath or a wind. In the Hebrew Bible, ruah or spirit is the breath or essence of life. It is the life force, the energy, the rhythm, the pulse of creation. Ruah is the wind that stirred the primordial waters on creation morning. And it is that same wind, that same breath that fills our lives and caresses our cheeks in those moments of awe and wonder. So I think to be spiritual is to experience and to be one with that essence. It is to slow down, to be present, to inhale the breath of life. In fact, I think it's important to remember that the original meaning of the word inspiration is to breathe in the essence or the spirit of life. And if being spiritual is ultimately about experience and not belief, then spirituality is everything that enables one to experience, to be inspired, to breathe in the essence of life. Spirituality has nothing to do with what you believe. It's about being open to those moments of deep connection and being intentional about cultivating them. I must say that when someone tells me that they don't do spirituality or spiritual growth because they are an atheist or an agnostic or a humanist, I think to myself that those things are wonderful and I think ultimately have little to do with experiencing awe at a beautiful sunrise or deep connection and oneness while singing a moving hymn in church. Spirituality is about breathing in that awe and deep connection. At the same time, I think it's important to note that spiritual growth, which is a phrase we use a lot around here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Akron, that spiritual growth is not about moving toward a particular belief or doctrine. Rather, it is about cultivating a greater openness and a deeper awareness of the beauty, the blessing, and the mystery of life. And it is that basic need for openness that, in my view, makes Unitarian Universalism such a deeply spiritual religious tradition. It's openness that makes this faith so spiritual. You see, we encourage and celebrate the kind of openness and intentionality that makes spirituality and deep connection possible. And then rather than telling you what your experiences mean or trying to force them into a single theological framework, we seek to challenge and, yes, inspire you to cultivate those experiences, to find meaning in them, and then to integrate them, those experiences and those meanings, into your life into the life of this church community, and yes, into the world. Now, before leaving you this morning, I want to pick up on something you heard during the welcome and announcements, that today is Small Group Ministry Sunday here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Akron. For those of you who don't know what Small Group Ministry is, it's a program that many Unitarian Universalist congregations, including this one, have, where groups of folks who sign up to be in groups of about 6 to 10 people, maybe 8 to 10, meet twice a month here at the church to engage in spiritual conversation, deep listening, and deep, deep connection. That's what small group ministry is about. And I think that's an important piece to think about as we talk about spirituality. You see, from stories like mine that I told you at the beginning of my sermon, I think it's easy to make the assumption that being spiritual is something we basically do by ourselves. It's something you do when you're on that mountaintop. It's something you do when you're walking through the forest. It's something you do when you're sitting by yourself in meditation or in prayer. But I want to say that the paths to spiritual depth and connection, they most decidedly do not necessarily lead only to a cliff overlooking an ocean. They are found in every moment in our daily lives, and especially in community and in relationship. Now, after the service, there will be an experience of small group ministry. You get a taste of what it's like to share your spiritual life, to be in community, and to be able to talk and to listen in an environment that is safe and hopeful. I hope all of you who are looking for a new way, looking for a way to get connected, will consider participating in this after-church experience. And just to be clear, when the service is over and you're walking out through that area, through that main hallway, which we call the crossroads, there'll be a couple of volunteers. I know Becca is one of them. She was here a minute. There she is. There's Becca. They will have tickets. By the way, you don't have to pay for these tickets. They're just tickets with the number, I believe, of a classroom where you will be invited to go to be part of this small group ministry experience. And I can tell you from my own spiritual journey in life that small group ministry is powerful and transforming. I participated in small group ministry for a number of years before I actually came here and stood here on Sunday mornings. And I have to tell you that small group ministry truly enriched and changed my life. As I journeyed alongside the members of my group, listening and being heard, caring and being cared for, I experienced a depth of connection and beauty that I hadn't thought possible. I learned that the Spirit moves in and among our connections to one another. And I experienced moments of love and depth that took me to a place that I only thought existed in a snow squall on a cliffside in England. Friends, how you choose to experience deep connection and to cultivate your spiritual life, that, of course, in Unitarian Universalism, is ultimately up to you. We don't insist that you follow one method or one practice. In fact, we don't insist that you follow any method or any practice at all. But what we do seek and what we do hope is that you will choose to live your life with intention, with purpose, and with openness to the beauty, the mystery, and the possibilities of life. For if we are open to those moments of deep, deep connection, the breath of life will flow through our lives and bring meaning and hope to ourselves, to each other, and to the world. Thank you for listening, and blessed be.